So, Hard Yarners, today we are here, and a heavy theme of the podcast is electing people that have been in the industry that know what they're doing. So, alltradescover.com.au have all been ex-tradies and they know the industry.
Yes.
So, if you want someone that's experienced it and lived it, alltradescover.com.au. If you're a small business, if you're a tradie that's looking for any sort of insurance, hit them up.
Yeah.
Tell them we sent you.
Yeah, they're great. They're big supporters of the podcast, and support those who support us.
Yep.
Also, this episode is brought to you by Crafted Finance. We talked a bit about finance today, but the good thing about Crafted Finance, they are like-minded. They want to give
They want sovereign wealth.
Their listeners, they just really want to present you with all the options, the best options. At the end of the day, it's up to you. Whatever you choose, they put it in your hands. But they lay it out for you pretty simply, pretty understandably, and make sure you understand how you can pay the least amount of interest over the term of the loan, the best ways to do it. Mate, if you want to choose the worst case, but you get in right then and there, it's your choice, but they're going to give you all the options.
They want your interest about their interest to fix your interest.
Perfect. But yeah, get around Crafted Finance. They are good people, like-minded, and again, supporters of the podcast. So support those who support us. But we were joined by Gerard, Rennick, People First Party, the launch. Well, it's already up and running. But mate, what did we talk about today? Bloody awesome episode.
Well, we talked about the importance of getting active and, making a stand and don't just sort of talk the talk. We've got to walk the walk and provide solutions and don't let yourself get too negative about what's going on. Try and solve the problem instead and finding inspiration from our forefathers who built this wonderful country. And we still have so much opportunity left in this country that we shouldn't, get too down on ourselves. We also spoke about some solutions, monetary policy, tax policy, ways to solve today's problems, vision for tomorrow, and ways to, build up a sovereign wealth fund again.
Yeah, and it's actually understandable as well. There's a few words that we break down.
Yeah.
But there's light at the end of the tunnel. And if you're thinking, how can I make a difference? Nothing's changing. This is the episode you want to listen for some actual actionable reactions.
That's it,
or
mate.
pre-actions. So you don't have to react anymore.
Yes, correct. But mate, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And without further ado, let's get hard.
Let's get sovereign.
To Hard Yarns Podcast.
I am fucking fat.
Anything Chris White says, please disregard it.
5D is actually a state of being. It's a unity consciousness.
That was Hard Yarns with me, Frankie Rose. So I'm going to throw it over to your co-host,
Daniel Jelby.
And Cameron Brand.
I would do this and then I'd gong.
Free in attendance for the millions listening at home. Let's get hard.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much for joining us in person this time. Last time was Zoom. It was good.
Yeah.
But it becomes a bit of a Q&A. This is a bit more of a chat.
Yeah.
More,
Yeah.
palatable, I think. So, firstly, mate, thanks for coming straight off the plane.
You're welcome.
And starting a new party.
Yeah, well, the party's been started, but we're still building it. So, it's going to take probably, a year to two. Well, I'd like to think by 12 months in, we're just updating our CRM system. We're getting our merch ready for Christmas. Payment systems and things like that. Just when you're doing your raffle tickets, and so there's a bit of it, what you call IT administration you have to do. You set up a party. It's all that boring stuff, but it's important because it's the key message with starting this party. The aim is to build a machine to beat the machine.
Yeah.
So we can sit here and talk about issues till the cows come home, but if we have not got a machine, and basically that is the machine is all the people out there who are frustrated. We have to galvanise them and coordinate them and get them structured in a way where they can start to beat the major parties.
That's a great idea.
So what's happened, in the last 20-odd years, we've seen a number of minor parties come along, but they don't necessarily, they'll recruit candidates 3 weeks before an election, and many times they'll just dump candidates in. I know in Wagga, for example, one minor party put a Queenslander in the seat, in the seat of Riverina. 3 weeks out, never went to Riverina, collected their 4%, and that's not good enough. We want to beat, it's not good enough to just want to sit on the crossbench and whinge all the time.
Yeah.
We actually want to make a difference. The reason why I stayed in politics was that I want to make sure our children get the same opportunities our forefathers gave to us. I want to stand up for those Australians who try and stand up for themselves.
Yeah.
And I want to make the government serve the people, not control the people.
That's great. Would this be like that silent majority that are frustrated but don't know what to do?
Oh, and that was one of the things I got all the time when, I was in politics. What do we do? How do we stop this?
Yeah.
And it's like, you've got to join a party. I mean, I tried to sort of save the LNP, but, they got rid of me instead. So that's it.
Yep.
Fair enough, whatever. So I'll go out on my own, so to speak. I mean, I'm happy to merge with other parties. I'm still talking to a couple of other parties. And yes, we do need to merge.
Yeah.
And the sooner the better.
Yeah. This is a conversation.
Well, it is Perth. It is difficult to merge.
I've Joel Jamal's been talking about this. I don't know if you're aware of Joel, but the minor parties not working against each other and coming together. Is that something you're working for?
Well, we do, but it needs to be in a new party structure.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily go into any one existing party structure at the moment.
Yeah.
Some of them have too much baggage and too many skeletons in the closet.
Yeah.
Needs to be a fresh rebrand. And then move forward like
For
that.
the layman listening at home that doesn't know too much about politics, what sort of structures are there that exist that aren't working, and how would you break that down or amalgamate them into a newer?
Well, what we need is, and this is what we're trying to set up with people first, is, okay, everyone, so there's no delegate system within the party, right? So when I lost my pre-selection vote, even though there were 10,000 members in the Queensland LNP, about 250 people voted on the day. Right. And of that 250, there were 40 state MPs that nearly all voted against me on block, 20 Brisbane City State councillors. So the other regional councillors didn't vote. They voted against me on block, as did the young LNP that were controlled by the left, even though they might only win with, say, 56% of the vote in their delegate system inside their little party structure. They got 100% of the votes. So even though I only lost by 3 votes, basically about 80 or 90 votes weren't even from the grassroots members. They were from the parliamentary wing of the party. Okay. And they were the guys that ganged up against me because I wasn't drinking Kool-Aid and their lobbyists and all that, because these guys, listen to the big end of town, not the bottom end of town. Yeah. And this is the problem. So what we want is a proper democratic process within the party. Mm-hmm. So like the year after next, when we start opening up nominations for the 2028 federal election, everyone's allowed to nominate and everyone is allowed to then vote in their area for who's going to represent them in the area. So if you're in WA and we want a WA Senate candidate and you nominate, and then you can go on the day, we'll book a hall and we'll have a pre-selection, and you'll stand in front of your fellow party members and you go, hi, my name's Cameron, I want to run for People First, this is why I want to run, I want my children to have the same opportunities our forefathers gave to us, etc., etc.
Yeah.
You'll then take questions from the members. It's exciting. It's the best part of being in a party because, you get to ask questions, and it's good practice too for when you do go out in the real world to get grilled by your own members first.
Yeah.
But this is where it's broken down, you see. So it's quite ironic. I have to say, let's stick to the party stuff and then we'll jump on to the irony of this week's politics. But so you're going to be given a say. Everyone's going to be given a say. You don't have to just be a delegate to get a vote.
Yeah.
And we're going to actually have pre-selections, and I'll touch on this in a minute. You're also going to have a say. So we've got a number of policy motions already lined up next year that branch members are going to bring forward to bring policy on the platform. And we'll also have AGMs every 12 months within our branches and our state divisions.
Yep.
So you get to elect the people who run the party.
Yeah.
And this is the problem. So where the Liberal Party, in particular the Coalition, has fallen down is that they have stopped listening to their members. Classic example was this week, whereby the Liberal Party had to fly to Canberra at a cost of about, said News Corp said about $100,000, and I believe it, right, using taxpayers' money to decide whether or not they're going to drop net zero. But the whole thing is their state division, so I know the WA Liberal Party state division voted against net zero. So why did Michaelia and Matt and these guys have to fly over to Canberra to talk about it? It's like, hang on, no, we've been told, and Northern Territory, South Australia, Queensland all voted to drop net zero. So instead of going to Canberra and talking about it, they should be out in the streets talking to people in the streets about it. Yeah. Right? And that's where the Liberal Party, for example, has fallen down. It's quite ironic. Barnaby's, not happy with the Nationals. He was the leader of the Nationals when Morrison signed up to net zero. And now he's complaining about it. Angus Taylor spoke against net zero.
Yeah.
He was the energy minister who actually went over to Glasgow with Morrison and signed up to net zero. So the hypocrisy of these people backflipping.
Well,
you know,
as soon as
4
they're
years-
out of that position, right? They go, oh, well, they do it because they're in that power. And then as soon as you're on the opposition, you're allowed to complain about anything and act like you care what the people think.
Exactly, and this is
Yeah.
why you can't trust them.
Yeah.
Because, and then Susan Lay's come out today and said, we're going to back gas. Well, I just did a post 2 weeks ago where AGL said the cost of gas was $115 a megawatt hour versus coal, which was $22 a megawatt hour. She thinks backing gas is going to lower the cost of power. She's kidding herself. Yeah, yet again, you just shake your head.
Yeah.
But back to, so that's why we need a party structure that listens to the people.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important because traditionally, up until recently, you generally have 60 safe coalition seats. You'd have 60 safe Labor seats. And then you might have 30 marginal seats that might decide the election on the day of the general election.
Yeah.
But those other 60 plus 60 seats, 120 out of the 150 seats in Parliament,
Yeah.
they're all decided on the day of the pre-selection, right, inside the party rooms, right? Like, not out on the street, but actually inside these pre-selection rooms. And it's generally speaking, sometimes you'll get someone from the marginal seat sort of solidify their seat so they then become ministers. But generally, because those marginal seats go in and out with the tide, they're not around long enough. The MPs aren't around long enough to become ministers. So most of your ministers come from the safe seats.
Yeah.
Now, given that they're in the safe seats, they know they don't have to listen to the electorate. So, I think Fremantle's a safe Labor seat, isn't it?
Well, is it a safe seat because it's just always been that way and no one's voted any different? Or
Yeah,
is it
exactly.
because of the-
Yeah. And this is the problem with compulsory voting.
There shouldn't be
is that-
such thing as a safe seat.
Yeah.
Well, they shouldn't in theory,
Yeah.
but because we've got an entrenched two-party system in this country whereby they've set it up so that you've got to get 4% of the votes, this is what we're going to struggle with. We'll bust our backsides to get, raise, say $1 million for the next election. If we spend that and don't get 4% in any seat, we won't get any of that money back. Whereas the Liberals and the Labor and the Greens and One Nation now to an extent, they will get their 4%, so they can spend right up to what they expect to get, and they know they'll get that money back.
Yeah.
So they've made it, and then to the extent that the two majors, their primary votes have dropped from, say, the mid to high 40% down to low 30s.
Yeah.
In order to make up for their revenue shortfall, they've increased the amount of money they get per vote from $3.38 to $5.
Yes.
So they've given themselves a 50% pay rise, despite the fact that their performance has dropped by 30-40%.
Yeah.
So that it's just so entrenched as well. And so this is why,
Seems
yet
so
again,
hopeless.
we've got to build this machine.
Yeah.
We do still need to focus on the issues, and we've got to keep talking about the issues to keep people engaged. But we've got to do that hard yards in terms of starting a new party, but setting up the corporate governance, setting up the quality assurance, setting up the checks and balances, the transparency, and most importantly, the accountability when you're actually, if so, going back to net zero again.
Yeah.
So Morrison said in 2019 election, we're not signing up to net zero.
Yeah.
2 years later, goes to Glasgow, signs up to net zero.
Yeah.
Now, the members of the coalition were ropeable, right? And that was part of the reason why I withheld my vote in COVID, because I was already had a sort of beam of bonnet about the fact we lied about, net zero.
Yeah.
But so what the Liberal Party in New South Wales did was that they didn't allow Susan Lee and Alex Hawke to face their members for the pre-selection because had they done that, they would have lost their seats.
Yeah.
So there was a bloke called Matt Kemazula who tried to sue the New South Wales Party and say, no, you've got to hold pre-selections. I mean, we're supposed to be a democratic, party. And in New South Wales, they did go to court and the judge said, no, the New South Wales executive doesn't have to hold pre-selections.
Yeah.
So these people weren't made to go and face their own members.
Yeah.
And this is where, so add in the pre-selection stitch up in my case where they, basically didn't give Peter Dutton the vote. They go, little proud we don't get on a vote. So there's a number of things weren't, a number of regularities.
Yeah.
But the point is that the party now, the coalition is now being run by the big end of town and it's top down, just like the Labor Party. It's not a true grassroots movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is that's all of that is contributing to that distrust.
Yeah,
Because
exactly. Yeah.
There's the rise of podcasts like ours and other people who are punters and Joel with the Arc who are pointing out the hypocrisies and the loopholes that politicians are jumping through. But they're also, I think, that distrust comes from not listening. And what we see very, very obviously with COVID is a perfect example, or even this mass immigration stuff that's happening at the moment. Just blanket painting anyone who's concerned, has a very real concern about housing crisis or cost of living, mass immigration. Anyone's going to these protests, they're being blanket called racists. And that's clearly not being listened to.
Yeah.
Whereas if they were to listen to these people, they have very nuanced good and well-educated concerns that they just want explaining, not just to be disregarded and dismissed. And I don't think we're seeing that at all amongst any party, really.
No, and they don't have to listen because, as I said before, like explained before, they're in those safe seats.
Yeah.
And they know that the top end of town now controls the pre-selection process. So they know if they want us to keep their jobs, they've got to listen to the top end of town, not the active grassroots, not the battlers out on the main street.
Yeah. And I guess that feeds into things like, the social media ban coming up and digital ID and suppression and censorship.
Yeah.
And the dangers of that, which is the concern. Now, obviously, you could see there's a good reason to have a social media ban for kids because, I don't want my daughter to be on social media, but that's should be my
choice.
I
I
saw
saw
you
you talking about that the other day. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
And so, we see these sorts of things happening. I just have that fear of it being leveraged and used in a poor way, specifically getting information out like what we're able to put out, what other independent journalists are able to do, and raise awareness around topics. What are your concerns around the digital ID, the social media ban, and how it's actually been leveraged?
Oh, well, it'll be government oversight, won't it? I mean, it'll be an invasion of privacy. The big one for me, it will be digital currency. That's the big daddy because that's when they can really start to coerce you and punish you for the way you spend your money.
Yeah. The carbon footprint thing is interesting that you're already seeing in bank statements. And you're like, well, how long before they actually start going, well, you've used your allocated amount of carbon credits for the year.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
Is that, look, you go, well, that's dystopian future conspiracy theory, but I don't think it is, considering what we've seen in the past.
Well, I did a post on this the other day, and I said, look, if you said to me 10 years ago, I was going to be saying things like this about the digital currency.
Exactly.
Not so much the digital currency, but the digital ID. I probably would have had a little bit more trust in government, but after COVID, I have no trust.
No.
And after having been inside government, whereby I saw my colleagues all agree with me privately, but publicly say exactly what they knew they had to say, because when they're out talking to the public, it was like a performance to them.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas instead of being genuine and saying what you would say to me, behind closed doors, they then put on a different face to go outside.
So how can we then have any trust in that anything will ever happen if we know that they think this, but they're not able to act on it or willing to act on it?
It's that helplessness where you're like, we know that the politicians don't feel this way. They talk shit, and you just don't trust your government anymore.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
Well, okay, so everyone's a journeyman. Everyone's self-interest always, as Paul Keating once said, always back the horse called self-interest because it'll win every time. So you've got to make the politicians' self-interest that they're accountable back to the grassroots members.
Yeah.
So that they know if they don't do what they said they were going to do to the grassroots members, they get sacked in pre-selections.
Yeah.
These look, and I was just saying this on the way in from the airport. The other big thing we've got today that we didn't necessarily have so much of 50 years ago is the level of debt in this country. If you take that COVID scenario whereby millions of people were forced to take the vaccine to keep their jobs, I can't give you a percentage, but there would have been, pick a number, 10, 20, 30% of people that would have told their bosses, given them the middle, flip the bird at them if they didn't have debt and they didn't have to put food on the table for their children and a roof over their head.
Yes.
Right. So the more, prosperous you are, and financially empowered, and the greater freedom you have as well. Because as I like to say, our freedoms are a child of affluence. And if everyone owns their own house, it's got some coin in the bank and can afford to have a 6 months off or whatever.
Yeah.
A lot more people would have been able to say no. But when you're going to lose your job, and if it was just you with no children, you might go, I'll wing it for whatever. But when your children are going to school, you've got to pay the mortgage off, you don't want to lose the house, whatever, you'll do what you're told. It's just, so this is the other problem we've got in the world too. And then, of course, you've got the centralisation now of the media, whereby it's very hard to speak up against the narrative, right? And it's interesting, the cross-media ownership laws, they were abolished by the Morrison government, or it might have been the Turnbull government. One Nation voted for it, actually.
That's only recent.
Yeah, this is 6 or 7 years ago. But that's one of our policies, is to bring back cross-media ownership laws where we actually force these companies. So today you've got pretty much the ABC. I mean, you'll always have the ABC, News Corp, and Fairfax 9. So Fairfax has Sydney Morning Herald, The Age, the big newspapers, and obviously all the, and then the Channel 9, and then Murdoch has Sky and all the newspapers.
Yep.
And then, Channel 7 and Channel 10, they're sort of tiddlers.
Yeah.
So 80% of your mainstream media controlled by those three organisations today. That is so centralised. And yet again, I think this is why we've seen the proliferation of social media accounts, because people are just so sick of the same narrative and the same headlines. There's a little bit of...
Well, it's very easy to pick it apart. Like we did it a couple of weeks ago. I put up a clip specifically calling out Channel 9, I think it was, for their way they reported on the immigration.
Melbourne
they called them
protest.
the anti-immigration rally instead of but they also left out the fact that the police chief or commissioner, who I can't remember who it was, made the comments, but said this was a issue motivated
by the left.
By the left, and completely left that out, saying it was the anti-immigration people who were violent. And it was very easy to pick that apart and go, well, no, that's
it's
incorrect.
easy if you're awake to it. If you're just a regular Joe Blow who goes to work, does 9 to 5 and has no other interests or has never been exposed to the fact that the media lies.
But that's why it's so important to have independent podcasts like ourselves who are just going to go, no, you're lying.
But you know why they
then with that
censored it, don't you?
censorship stuff that could come out,
Yeah, but you know why they censored it, don't you?
No.
What's the biggest profit driver for Fairfax and Murdoch?
It's just division and hate.
No, realestate.com
Oh, wow.
and Domain. So their biggest, they make their most money. So obviously advertising is what drives media.
Yeah.
Who's their biggest advertiser? Property.
Yeah.
So real estate, I remember realestate.com when it listed, and I was looking at it thinking, should I buy it or not? I never did. And then I sort of went back.
Oh, shit.
I can't remember, but it just went through the roof.
Yeah.
And it's the same for the Age. Like if you look at, Fairfax, that is, if you look at their profit drivers, it's those real estate classified ads.
And what
Yeah.
the
So
link
that's
would
why
be-
they want high immigration, mate,
Yeah.
because they just love people coming in. They love the house flipping because they are cleaning up on it.
Yeah, and that's when you can see politicians or even to a bit larger extent actual parties prioritising corporate interests. We can see it. Like everyone can see it. Even your layman can see that they're prioritising that, and we get frustrated. No wonder we get protests. No wonder people get pushed to that limit where they sometimes get violent. We're all stressed. We're all under pressure. We've got financial stresses with the cost of living. People are struggling to find rentals. At some point, if you throw enough kindling in there, it just takes one little spark for that to blow up. And I feel like that's by design.
Here's the
is what
thing,
they
though.
want, yeah.
Don't blow up.
Yes.
Okay, get smart. Don't blow up, because if you blow up and if you get emotional, you'll lose the argument immediately. And this is where we've got to be very, this is yet again, we're trying to build this party. There's a way. You've got to build the machine to beat the machine. If you try and take them on with these sort
this is
of
gonna
rallies
resonate.
on weekends and stuff like that, you only need one idiot, to go out there and, do something, stupid, or when one person talking to the media says something completely outrageous, even though it's one person out of 100,000 people, who do you think the media is going to report on?
Yeah.
So I'm interested as well. This is something I've been thinking about, and maybe you don't think this works, but this, I guess, civil, peaceful non-compliance. And you could argue, well, that's just not going to do anything. Look at COVID. People were getting arrested. But if it was a collective civil non-compliance, let's say the mask mandate, for example, made no sense. We could see that the actual CDC had it on their own website that it wasn't going to work. If we collectively, 10 million people went out and said, it's all good,
But
man.
how's
I'm
that
not
solve the problem?
No,
So-
exactly.
So yet again,
Yes.
why talk about the problem? Let's talk about the solution.
Yeah,
And that's
so-
what we want to do at one People First, and that's the difference between us and One Nation.
Yeah.
Tend to focus on the problems all the time. Yeah, we know what the problems are. Let's fix them.
So then my point is that is the pushing against creating more resistance, or do we need to push against? Because, you use ideologies, for example, the extreme left and the extreme right. If the left didn't go so far left, you wouldn't have these extreme rights trying to push against and level it out as a result, an overcorrection. You'd probably have it come closer and closer together. And I look at it like an elastic band. It sits there nicely dangling in a reasonable circle. And the more you pull it apart, the tenser it gets, the more tension that's erupting. And on each side, it's getting further and further apart. And the distance between the two sides is just so divided, we can't see that.
That's right.
And if you pull it too far, that fucking snaps.
But the people in the middle are the ones that are getting pissed off at the people on the outsides.
Yes.
So maybe the
but
solution
the people
is...
and the people in the middle are being more stretched to the left or the right, and you're considered to be something. Whereas if we just stop that tension, stop pushing against each other, and maybe that's too hippie, maybe
But that's
too,
where the solutions come in. So yet again, and this is the thing. I mean, you can protest if you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do, right?
Yeah.
But you take the August 31st rally where it was estimated somewhere like 200,000 people marched.
Yeah.
Give or take 10,000. Let's say it was 200,000. If they had all, and let's say it cost you $50 to come into town, park your car, get a bottle of water, maybe have a feed on the way home.
Yeah.
200,000 people had joined a party for $50. You could have raised $10 million.
Yeah.
And had some serious coin for advertising at the election.
That's a great point.
Another thing is they could have delivered 50 flyers each, 10 million flyers into to 10 million households, with their 1.6 people per household, so 15, 16 million people. That had 5 solutions on one side: lift the tax-free threshold to 45 grand, voluntary superannuation, i.e. keep your super, pay childcare to the parents, reduce immigration, and reform our taxation monetary system, put Australia first.
Wow.
On the other side, QR code, contact email address, and an invitation to an event in a couple of weeks' time to meet members in your local community who think like you. You could have got a message out to 10 million people.
Wow, that's
rather
much
than
more
talking
effective.
it yourself. No one's listening. You can't make decisions out in the car park, right? You've got to be in the boardroom during the weekdays, not in the car park or in the CBD.
Give me
in the
goosebumps,
afternoon,
actually, because
right?
that's a great...
So
the way you
yet-
phrase that is perfect.
Yeah, and this is where, because I know some of the freedom organisers have got the shits with me because, they're saying I'm slagging the rallies off. I'm not slagging them off. What I'm saying is we've got to close the circle, and it's not enough to just talk the talk. We've got to walk the walk.
Yeah, because people love to complain. The easiest thing to do is to whinge.
The easiest thing to complain, and I've had 6 years of it as a senator, right? And I'm like, okay, well, I'll give this, I'll do another 6 years now of trying to organise this frustration into a coherent,
I think
constructive
this is going to
movement.
resonate with a lot of our listeners. Big time.
And that's what we're trying to do, people first, is to try and actually let's deliver the solutions.
Yes.
And not only that, so we want to deliver the solutions today, but we also want to provide the vision for tomorrow. Because the vision and the solutions will give people hope, and that will inspire them.
Well-
because, I've got to be honest with you, we should not be sitting around and wallowing in self-pity if we live in Australia.
Yeah.
We live in the greatest country on earth. We live in a golden age. Even though you might seem like we're doing tough. I mean, I just drove in from the airport. Perth's a beautiful city. It's one of the most beautiful cities
We
in
are
the
very
world.
lucky, yeah.
We are lucky. And we owe it to our children to actually make sure they get the same opportunities our forefathers gave to us. When our forefathers 200 years ago came out here and they were busting their ass out in the scrub, right, in the shanties and whatever, they faced fires, floods and droughts. Did they sit around whinging about it and feeling sorry for themselves?
No, he's got it
no,
done.
we got to get on with it, right? And that's the thing.
So
Yeah.
on solution focus, back
Yeah.
to net zero, we see maybe this is an oversimplified understanding of what's going on, but we see, we're trying to work towards not using our own resources that we have so abundantly available in our own country, but we're also willing to sell those same resources off to China and India and other countries that are putting those same resources into the same atmosphere. It seems like it's a bit of a hypocrisy. Is that too broad and too...
I think you've been too soft there. I
Yeah,
mean,
okay.
it's more than just hypocrisy. It's just complete and utter stupidity.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, this word gets overused, but let's use it. It's treasonous,
Yeah.
why on earth, why can't we use our own resources here? Because not only are we not using our own resources, we're turning around and importing foreign-made renewables that are 70% owned by foreigners.
Yeah.
I mean, we may as well just, go and take all our money out of the bank and put it on an aeroplane and give it to someone to fly off.
Yeah. And then
Because-
carry on.
But, I mean, that's what we're doing with this. And I mean, it's not with just net zero. It's across the entire spectrum of our tax system, our monetary system, our immigration system, our energy system. We constantly put foreign interests in front of the interests of the Australian people.
Is that because we're so small? Like,
But no, it's because we're
numbers-wise?
weak and our politicians are weak and insipid. Right. And, they're not pushing back. Now, you'd expect the Labor globalists, Labor have always been command and control to push this narrative. And this is throughout the 80s, this is exactly what Hawke and Keating did. They lifted capital controls. They let manufacturing go offshore with the Button Plan. Hawke took, the Tasmanian government to court in 83 for the Franklin Dam decision that said under 5129 of the Constitution, the foreign treaties power, they could override the plenary powers of the states. That has destroyed infrastructure construction across Australia since then, and people don't join the dots on that.
Yeah.
Dawkins in 1990, Dawkins Plan, Labor Senator for Education, said we'll pay all our kids to go to university. Now, some people should go to university, but a lot more shouldn't. There's a lot of people we need to get on the tools.
Yeah, I was a teacher for 10 years.
Yeah,
And
and
completely
there's nothing
agree.
wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
Like my best mates are all tradies, mate. That's like I grew up in Chinchilla, and we that was
They're the
great
next
thing about growing
millionaires
up in a small
at the
town.
moment.
Yeah. But yet again, they're coming out of university broken, brainwashed when they're 22, 23. And then, of course, the piece of the resistance when Keating said he introduced superannuation in 1992. Now, but here's the thing. He didn't say by 2025 we're going to take 12% of your income, give it to someone you never met, and there's no guarantee you're going to get it back when you're 67. He didn't tell us that.
It's called a relationship, isn't it?
And it's not just 12%. It might be 12% of your gross income. But if you're earning 80 grand, the median income in this country is 80 grand, you know, you should pay just under 20 grand tax on that, 50 grand to live on. That last $10,000 you got to save, guess what? 12% of 80,000, 9,600. It goes off and you're left with $400 to live on like that.
Can you elaborate on that decision, the Tasmanian one? Because we're not familiar with. Are you familiar with that?
No, not too much.
So it's called the Franklin Dam decision, right? And what happened was that the Tasmanian government wanted to dam the Franklin River. Now, put aside whether or not that was a good decision for the environment or not.
Yep.
It was the mechanism, the constitutional mechanism that Hawke used to actually undermine the powers, what they call the plenary powers of the states.
Right.
So because we're a federation, the states, through that constitution, gave powers to the states under Section 5129. Sorry, under Section 51. Now, Section 5129 says one of the powers the federal government will have is in regards to foreign treaties with other countries.
Okay.
Now, this was written in 1900, you know, in the 1890s, 1900, right? In 1900, there was no League of Nations or United Nations. When those founding fathers wrote that constitution, I could bet you, you know, my bottom dollar that they did not mean that meant that you could use foreign treaties to override the domestic powers, domestic legislation. Right? This was only to do with, you know, cross-border interactions. Now, Australia's greatest High Court judge, Owen Dixon, in a case Burgess versus the Crown in 1938, I think it was, and Doc Evett was on it as well, because there was a case in the 1930s where this crazy guy, Burgess, I think it was, he was a stuntman doing stunts around Sydney Harbour Bridge. And so the federal government said, you got to stop doing this, you know. And this bloke took him to court and said, you don't have any powers of the aviation powers, right? Because there's nothing in a constitution about aviation. Because in 1900, there were no planes there, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I'm just telling you this story because it's interesting how things get interpreted along the way.
Yeah, they always use things
and
not
so,
in the way they were intended. Yeah.
But by 1938, there were foreign treaties in regards to aviation. And look, it makes sense that the federal government should deal with aviation because, you know, you don't want foreign planes just coming in and you don't want different laws across different states. I mean, for anything, I mean, we've still got too many different laws across different states. But for aviation, right, we just want, you know, if you're a foreigner coming into a country, you'd think it was mad you had different laws to land in Queensland to WA to New South Wales. So at the time when they made this decision in the Crown versus Burgess, and I think it was 38, it did make sense that, you know, that the federal government should take those powers off the states, right? But Owen Dixon said then, he actually voted against it. He said this should only be for truly genuine international transactions and decisions. Now, he lost that, but that's what, and you can look it up, it's Crown versus Burgess, but that should have been what applied in the Franklin Dam decision because the state governments are responsible for building dams. Now, what's happened because of that, and forget, you know, it probably wasn't a great idea to dam the Franklin, but just put that aside for a minute. The federal government now overrides state governments doing anything. So you might remember there was a case a couple of years ago of a gold mine in Orange that Regis Resources, actually, they've got a mine over here in Western Australia, Tropicana. They own part of Tropicana over here. They had spent something like $160 million gaining environmental approvals they'd paid to the New South Wales government. So the New South Wales government said, yep, tick, 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 tick.
Because they got $160 million.
Well, but, you know, and this is what it costs. You know, this is the bureaucratic cost at the state government level, right?
Yeah.
And then at the federal government level, we got, you know, some Aboriginals and even the Aboriginals in Orange dispute whether or not these Aboriginals are even, you know, local Aboriginals from that area, overrid that environmental decision based on cultural grounds. Okay, it was the same for Adani back in 2017 when, you know, they wanted to build a coal mine in Queensland. They stopped it on the grounds of some finch, you know, some rare finch, and that's, look, in the Brigalow Belt. It's the Brigalow Belt in Queensland's a bit like the iron ore belt in Western Australia, right? Like it's huge, right? The idea that one mine that might have made up, you know, a 1/10% of the land mass was going to threaten one bird was just absurd. But the environmental defenders officers in these states are all lefties. Whenever they don't want something to happen, they then go to the federal government and then that, what do you call it, the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Agency, and then they come in and stop the state government from building anything. It's one of the reasons why, like certainly along the eastern seaboard, we've had no dams and next to nothing built since the 1980s, right? Because there's always these activists that stop anything from being built.
And why does the federal government, why would they decide against what the state government's done? Because
the bureaucrats are all left. Remember, so these are the same guys that voted for the Voice. They were the only territory that voted for the Voice, remember, despite even Victoria voted against the Voice, 55-45, right? I mean, that's just amazing.
Which they seem to have just disregarded in the...
Yeah, with the recent treaty decision. But because the bureaucrats, and they're the ones that tell the ministers what to do, remember? Because most of these bureaucrats, the ministers are just yes men who've sucked their way up to the top of the party system. And you'll get all the activists, and the activists are just out there. Activists, they make a lot of noise. It's a case of the tail wagging the dog.
Yeah, and squeaky wheel getting the grease. We need to just replace the wheel sometimes.
Yeah.
To use my own analogy.
Yes.
But so what? They've said that where does the foreign interest come to stop a law? So you said it was a foreign treaty?
Yeah, so it's you'll sign a foreign treaty to say you shouldn't build a dam or so they will then use that foreign treaty because they've signed a foreign treaty to say we've got to preserve X number of birds, we've got to preserve our there'll be biodiversity treaties.
So they're just using it to
cultural treaties,
plug and play, right?
Cultural treaties, all these things. So they use the treaties to override the powers of the states.
Wow. So and it's set a precedent from that all the way back. They just use that as a precedent, and sometimes precedents need to be re-precedented.
Absolutely. So what
different time.
So you need now. I mean, the problem with this one though is that was an interpretation. So under Section 76(1) of the Constitution, the High Court gets to make a judgment on the interpretation of the Constitution, right? Because sometimes these things end up being vague. The aviation case being a classic example, right? So it's not that easy, I don't think. I don't know whether you'd have to have a referendum to change the Constitution, or you'd need to go back to court and then get the High Court to somehow override the Franklin Dam decision, or whether you could do it through legislation.
There should be. I don't know if legislation's the way for everything moving forward. There's so much legislation that just
over legislation,
and they just keep fucking the other one up. Is there some sort of? I know we've gone off topic, but this is just my brain. I find it interesting. Is there some sort of way to go? Well, in that context. Obviously, we're nearly 100 years later. There's a complete different context.
Yes,
there's a complete different international relations. There's different resources, new technology. There should be some sort of logic applied.
Yeah. So solutions, we've got to have another Federation Convention. Yeah. So that they had the Federation Convention in the 1890s to sort of get the states to come together.
Yeah.
We need to have another one.
Yeah.
And we need to basically fix the inherent ambiguous responsibilities between state and federal governments, the vertical fiscal imbalance. So there's two sections to this. There's two parts of this. A lot of this stuff you wouldn't even need to touch the Constitution.
Yep.
You'd just say, right, let's use some common sense here. We don't need two education departments. We don't need two health departments. Let's give health to the feds. I mean, the state governments, the feds already do Medicare, private health insurance, PBS, all the drugs, NDIS, aged care. So why not just give public hospitals to the federal government to fund?
Yeah.
Let this area, like the local hospital boards, run the hospitals.
That makes sense.
So they have the autonomous on-the-ground decision-making. Let's give education back to the states, okay?
Are you a politician? Because this sure makes a lot of sense.
It
sounds logical.
This is one of our policies. And then what we're going to do is that would make the states $20 billion better off. And in return for that, guess what they have to do? Abolish payroll tax.
Okay.
Because that is the dumbest tax of all, taxing someone to employ someone else. Get rid of payroll tax.
What's the logic behind that one?
Oh, well,
just
you
more
tell
money
me.
for
I don't
government.
know where that came from, but that's an export tax as well, right? Because every time a small business grows in, starts paying people more than $1 million a year, let's say they're manufacturing, they've got to pay another 5% payroll tax. That's a $50,000 tax just to pay $1 million in wages.
Yeah.
So if you want to pay $1 million, we're going to charge you $50,000 for the privilege of you expending $1 million, which is benefiting our economy, which is probably owned by
and you wonder
else.
why we can't compete with overseas interests because we have these stupid
insane.
taxes on productivity.
Yeah.
It's just nuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're almost at this illogical point in, I don't know if it's always been like this or we're just being made aware to it, but it feels like we're at this teetering point where we're almost about to go into Orwell and lose everything. And that's where your solution based, from what I'm hearing, is trying to stop Do you feel like we're at the edge of a cliff,
No.
and if something gets done,
we're not.
There's
No,
always a
no,
way.
no. We are incredibly lucky. We have a country of 7 million square kilometres, 27 million people. Our wealth is what's holding us up. Now, if we're in another country that didn't have such access to vast, abundant resources, we might be in trouble.
Why?
But we do have time. We are definitely heading in the wrong direction. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And there's way too much government control, and the wealth is not being distributed. It'll never be distributed evenly, right? We're not going to start trying to, equalise
socialism or
outcomes.
whatever.
But we do have to reward the lifters, and we're not doing that, right? What we're doing is rewarding the grifters, and that's got to stop.
Yeah.
And we want to go back and empower. And this is, one of our key philosophies is we want to empower the individual and families and stand up to the unrestrained authority of the institutions. Big government, big corporations, because corporations are socialists. They're not capitalists. Big super funds and big media, right? And that's really important because all those people risk other people's money.
Yeah.
Right. So the true capitalist is someone that risks their own capital. Now that could be a tradie or a bricklayer that just gets out there and busts their backs and uses their hands every day. That's human capital.
Yeah.
This false dichotomy between human capital and financial capital has got to stop. And as we were saying before the program started, this left-right definition, that's ideology. I'm interested in outcomes. My outcome is what we want as an outcome is we want to empower families to get, I'll use this word, as rich as possible so they can pay their house off as quickly as possible. They can raise their children and not have to lie awake at night wondering how they're going to feed their children and pay the bills.
Yeah.
And in
and
terms
have
of
more time with their kids and watch the footy or whatever.
Well, why can't we be like a Norway and have some sort of sovereign wealth fund?
Well, we can be. Yeah.
How does that happen?
Well, the best. Number of ways. So this is going to get into the heavy stuff now. So we've got the simple. Let's fix the solutions today. Lift the tax-free threshold, lower taxes, childcare back to the parents, superannuation back to you. And all we're doing there is removing the middleman, removing childcare centres, removing big superannuation funds, and then removing some of the subsidies that we want to means tested defined benefit scheme for retired bureaucrats, not retired servicemen. And this is not for the states. So teachers and nurses, we're not going touch their defined benefits. It's not that at all. It's just for the bureaucrats in Canberra who have a liability of $340 billion for about 160 retired bureaucrats, or soon to be retired. That works out about $2 billion a pop.
fuck,
And that's not means
what
tested.
they're being looked after post retirement.
Yeah, so there's 40,000 bureaucrats that get paid over $70,000 a year, and they're not means tested. So they would already be. So a bloke called by the name of David Anderson, he's the recently retired managing director of the ABC. He was the managing director for about 6 or 7 years. He was paid over $1 million a year. His final salary is $1.1 million. His defined benefit is 37% of his final income until he dies. So that's $400,000 a year, right? He retired at 56, and he can go and work. He can get other jobs if he wants it. But if he lived till 86, or 30 years by 400,000 a year is $12 million.
We're in the wrong industry.
So we want to means test. Yeah. I mean, you guys won't be getting hit. Yards. Yeah, you should have been. You should have gone and got a job at the ABC.
Wow.
But this is it. This sort of stuff, right? And then remember, most of these people, retired bureaucrats, live in Canberra. The same lot that voted yes to the Voice when everyone else didn't, right? So it's not going to hurt us politically to go after these guys. We're going to get rid of subsidies for renewables. And the other thing Treasury don't do is they don't model secondary impacts when it comes to tax cuts, which is yet again discrimination against the battlers, because they assume if you give $1 tax cut to someone, none of that comes back to Treasury in the next 12 months. That's rubbish. If you're on $50,000 a year and you're struggling to make ends meet, and inflation's going up by 5% a year, that extra $1,000 you might get as a tax cut, you're going to spend that just to stay alive. And that's what we want to do. Like anyone that gets out of bed and puts their nose to the grindstone, and especially on those low income earners, when they could be sitting at home smoking dope and on the dole and probably getting paid as much, mate, they're the guys who've got to help the most. I grew up working in sheep yards and cattle yards on the farm, picking fruit.
The New Zealand dream, they call that.
But I worked just as hard in those jobs, if not harder, than I did once I got into corporate world and stuff like that. And those guys are the ones that keep the wheels turning.
To play devil's advocate, would that person, David Anderson, would he argue that he's busted his ass for all those years and he's worked, 200 hours a week? And
that's why I got paid $1 million a year.
Yeah.
Can't have it both ways.
Yeah,
So you can't get paid $1 million a year and then
When you
expect.
retire.
We don't get in the private sector. And by the way, that stopped for politicians at 2004.
Right.
So you can thank Mark Latham for that. Mark Latham did that because that liability would be over $500 million now. $500 billion now if Mark Latham didn't kibosh it.
And it's for such a small number of
exactly.
population.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it's not means tested. I mean, a lot of these people would be multimillionaires. I mean, people like Kevin Rudd, Joe Hockey, they became ambassadors to the United States.
Yeah.
These
I
guys
heard
got,
Kevin was pretty well liked by the United States.
I mean, and they've got all these cushy jobs after politics anyway.
Yeah, that's
where we feel there's such a gap between your everyday man and the politicians. They've got no fucking idea.
Yeah.
You're one of the only ones that actually speak and have some sort of grip on a bridge between the working class and then they're not elite, but the people that are in power that don't give a fuck because they've got their job, they're looked after, and as long as they do what looks after their back.
Well, and we were cursed and fucking told we were conspiracy theorists by calling out people like Mark McGowan for being loyal to the resources industry, and they would say, you just don't like him because of his COVID restrictions and stuff. No, like he's prioritising these people, not really helping and prioritising the people he's actually been voted in by. And then he's steps into a nice cushy job in how many different consulting jobs in the resources industry he gets. And that's a perfect example. But there's plenty of those examples.
And it's perfect timing that you're on because I've been saying to Branchy the last 2 months is like, well, fuck, what can we do?
Yeah.
Like, what can we do? It's going to happen. It's helpless. And
well, no, you can do something. Join
the
the party.
Yeah.
Just and remember, the world doesn't change; it evolves. Right. So it's just that incremental. I've got a little thing on my phone that says 1.01 to the power of 365, right, implying number of days a year. It ends up being like 40, whereas 0.99 to the power of 365 ends up being 0.03. Yeah. The point is that you just add on a little bit every day, and you just keep grinding
One
and
step
add
at a
on,
time.
add on.
I guess my fear is because we are fed the media, we are fed by 80%. Is you feel like there's legislation being put in place to stop all of the people having any more power. Like it feels like they're trying to block anything that the ground roots try to do. Like what was the thing that went through where they limited how much donations you can get per person?
The donations.
And essentially just becomes like a two-party system and you just feel hopeless,
Yeah, but don't let the fear, they do that to try and grind you down and destroy your willpower. Don't do it. Just push back and say, no, we're not going to be beaten.
Well, there's a definite concern within the general population. I think it's 82%. I've seen Punters Politics comment on this. 82% of people in Australia don't want to see lobbying and politicians, people paying for access.
We're banning paid lobbying, period.
Okay.
I mean,
So
volunteer lobbying
Yeah.
is okay. So, for example, we had, I used to see them every year when they came down, mothers who would fly to Canberra. They were from the Isolated Children's Association. So these were people that lived in rural Australia whose they had to pay to send their kids to boarding school and it cost a fortune. So they get a little bit of an allowance for that. They'd always come down and put their case forward. I'd always see them. But they were genuine volunteers. There was another lady, I can't remember the name of the fund, but her sister died from cancer. She'd come down. Like they were good people who were lobbying for the good reasons. It's when you have these slimy bastards behind closed doors getting paid a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they're usually ex-ministers and they go straight to the bureaucrats. They don't even go... Because the bureaucrats will give that advice to the minister, and the minister not knowing what to do will just be told what to do by the bureaucrat. Right, but paid lobbying is the one you want to stop.
So, and for people that don't know what that means, lobbying is when you have an interest, you're bringing it to Parliament or ministers or government.
Well, it's where you're taking payment from a corporation or some entity to basically then go and lobby a minister or someone. Yeah.
And not necessarily having to declare that you've been paid by.
Well, you have to declare you're a lobbyist, but they don't have to declare how much they're being paid.
Okay, right.
So I would have loved to have seen how much Pfizer was paying.
Everyone.
So I think Michael Photius, he's a well-known Liberal Party lobbyist. He, is it Premier State or State Street? No, it's not State Street. Premier State, or he runs a lobbying firm, and Pfizer was one of his clients.
Wow.
Throughout COVID. Now, I'd have loved to have known how much Pfizer was paying in lobbying fees.
Yeah.
And here's the dumb thing, what these political parties don't get is the two majors, is that if Pfizer's paying the lobbyist, it's actually cutting their grass in terms of their fundraising potential, right? Not that you want to be taking money from corporations for that, but so it's all behind the closed doors. So this is how it's bad.
Yeah. And then so that lends... the COVID is that perfect example, and the idea that, and I don't know how this was just rushed through, this bill with the Australian CDC That's concerning, having a centralised authority over
absolutely.
the whole of Australia's health decisions and what we want to do.
Yeah.
The lobbying is a perfect example. Can that be influenced? Donations?
Explain that, because is CDC centralised digital currency?
No.
Centre for Disease Control.
They're creating an Australian one.
But then doesn't that go in direct conflict with what we said, that the federal should have control, and then you give the states?
Yeah, well, we don't have a
choice. Local
choice.
boards the autonomy. I mean, ultimately, you trust your doctor, and health advice should be used to. Well, I think if they weren't being leaned upon by APRA, they probably, most of them you could trust. I mean, you're always going to get bad eggs in there, right? But I think anyone that goes through the pain of doing a medical degree,
of course,
taking on 100,000 plus in HECS debt. Then another 2 years, what do they call it, becoming a registrar or whatever, and then, becoming, some of them become a specialist. I mean, I remember I went overseas when I was 23, came back when I was 30, I had 7 years overseas, and then caught up with a mate I hadn't seen in a while, and he became a dermatologist. He was still studying in his early 30s to become a dermatologist, and I just said, shit, bro, I'm in 85 countries, mate, what are you doing? And literally, he had 2 cracks to become this specialist. I mean, look, and my mum was a nurse, right? I know how hard she works as a shift worker. They have to deal with sick people, dying people. It's not, it's not. I've got so much respect for our teachers and nurses.
Oh yeah. First responders in general.
Absolutely. So the last thing you want are these bloody bureaucrats, these hammers looking for nails, breathing all over these people. And this is what happened in COVID. I mean, I spoke to so many medical professionals that were basically being threatened with their careers. And, I as an accountant, I mean, I grew up on the farm, but I became a bookkeeper. I could move around and go into different industries. If you're in the nursing industry, that's it. There's no other industry you can go into. And especially if you're a doctor, you've spent, the best part of your youth, possibly, a couple $100,000 on HECS, plus say if you bought a GP practice, $1 million. These guys have got a lot of debt. They've devoted their life to helping people, and then you've got these scum-sucking bureaucrats coming over, and I've been told that APRA is just full of corporate lawyers looking, they're hammers looking for nails to pick on people. So look, I know that some doctors did sell out, but I do have a lot of empathy for what they do.
So having the CDC,
so what's the concern?
So yet again, if you've suddenly got this CDC, first though, they're like the RBA, they're an independent statutory authority.
Right.
So they're going to be sort of standalone and separate from the influence of the minister.
And answer to nobody.
Answer to nobody, which is kind of what APRA is now, right? And then they're going to be leaning, you're going to have this top-down approach again.
Yes.
Where they give this medical advice.
Yeah.
And, of course, if you're a GP and you try and push back, boom.
Yeah.
You're gone.
Because Northern Territory compared to here, compared to Vic, we're all going to have different needs, different
even
amounts of funding and different...
My 3 children, my eldest son's allergic to penicillin, my middle son's allergic to pecans and walnuts, and my daughter's allergic to nickel. Right? Same genes.
We're all different.
We're all different. Right? I mean, that's when I was thinking of my son who was allergic to penicillin. I remember finding out he was allergic to penicillin. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know there was such a thing. You could be allergic to penicillin, right? And that was a bit of a wake-up call. And then the day I found out, I was there the day I found out my son was allergic to pecans and walnuts, because you're at the park one day and he was a little 3-year-old. And he was doing what you do when you're a 3-year-old. Some other kid left his lunchbox out and James, he hooked into the walnuts. Next thing, we took him home. I took him home, and this is when we just had one car sort of, and so my wife was away in the car. He suddenly starts turning this bright shade of purple. I basically ran in a pram up to the hospital. Luckily, the hospital was 2 k's away, and I just sprinted there. It turns out he was allergic to pecans and walnuts, right? And they gave him, what do you call it, those things?
EpiPen.
Anaphylaxis. What is it?
EpiPen, anaphylaxis.
EpiPen. That's it. He came good in the end. But yet again,
Lucky there wasn't ramping back then.
Yeah.
Well, we took him to private hospital. I wasn't even going to go. It was lucky in the sense that the closest hospital was a private hospital. But
How did you find your daughter was allergic to nickel? You had to work in the back digging
she
a
had
trench in the mines.
she had some bracelet on or something. It's hers isn't too bad, but yet again, everyone's different, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you saw this clip. It was an inquiry, not estimates, but we had the head of the infectious diseases for the Royal Australian College of Professionals, GPs, general practitioners, right? And an inquiry one day, and he'd never heard the term immune imprinting, right? And he was the head of infectious diseases.
Yeah.
So you know how you're told not to overuse antibiotics, right? Because the the
stops you
bacteria will
from-
build up a resistance to the antibiotics if you overuse
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That was the same principle with the boosters. You shouldn't be giving people the same vaccine all the time because the virus will build up an immunity, and that was
Yeah.
what was happening. It was just mutating around that vaccine.
Everything.
But when I raised this issue with him, he said, I've never heard that term. It's like, how can you be the head of infectious diseases? So this is the other thing. You have these, and health departments like this. So that poor Kelly, the guy that, the little beady glasses and stuff, he'd never worked in a hospital. Or he had no hospital experience. Gerard he did an ag science degree and worked in the agricultural department at the state. Like, he was a career bureaucrat.
Yeah.
These people had no front-end experience. So, we do not want a centralised CDC that is making decisions on behalf of the whole country.
People that
And of
haven't
course,
been in it.
and then the other side of all that is, right, because, they're well paid in Canberra and all that, they'll get to go on a junket every year over to Switzerland or the World Health Organisation, and then they'll all, rub shoulders and they'll all come up with this plan. So then they bring the ideas from the World Health Organisation back into the Department of Health.
Yeah.
They then advise the minister, who, the last two ministers have been Mark Butler and Greg Hunt, neither of whom have ever worked in any medical profession.
Yeah.
So they have no idea
Yeah.
what they're doing, right? They're completely captured by their bureaucracy because they don't have real-world experience, and in particular real-world experience within health.
Yeah.
Right? So
doesn't make sense.
this is where the influence happens, right?
And
Because
those-
the World Health Organisation can't tell us what to do, but what they can do is influence us through the bureaucrats who all travel and have these conferences together, and then the bureaucrats, because the minister has no idea what they're doing. And I must admit, that's a good reason why I've definitely changed my mind from the Westminster system to the Washington system, whereby the president picks the secretary. So the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defence, that's the equivalent of the minister. They should be handpicked from the private sector if they have that experience. Whereas the problem with when you're picking them out of the ministry, out of the parliament,
Trying to look after their mates, hey?
well, it's not that. It's that they're career politicians. You
Yeah.
actually want people who are running
Yeah.
the executive to have experience in
Yeah,
the
if
real
you're in
world.
health, you should be have an experience.
the
If
other
you're the
thing is,
education
you-
minister,
you
you should
want-
have taught in
yeah.
the classroom so you know what the fuck the
Yeah, you're
teachers have
talking
gone
about,
through.
right?
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is, too, you want the proper separation of powers. We don't have proper separation of powers in this country because the executive, the ministers come out of the parliament. Now, in the case of like our last Morrison government, we had just over 76, because Craig left, 76 lower house reps and about 30 senators. And then you've got, say, about 30 ministers plus another, 10 or 15 committee chairs. Over just, about half of the caucus is the backbench. So your ratio of ministers to backbenchers is about 1 to 1, right? So if you're a backbencher that gets up and says something, that's it, you're gone, right? So you want the parliament to be able to control the executive. But when the executive have almost as many members inside the parliament, inside the party room as what the parliament has, the executive is telling the parliament what to do, not the parliament isn't telling
Is
the
that
executive.
because of like the sheer numbers? And they can
That's the number. So in
the
the UK, you've got 650 lower house MPs. They don't have state governments. And your governing party might be 325 MPs, but your ministry is about the same size as Australia. So their backbenchers outnumber their ministers by about 5 to 1.
Right.
So if their backbenchers revolt, the ministers do listen to their backbenchers. Because if the backbenchers revolt, the ministers will generally lose their... you'll change the Prime Minister and they get kicked out. But here in Australia, it's very hard for the backbenchers to get... Because even amongst the backbenchers, there's still a large number of toadies that are going to say nothing and do nothing, so they get promoted.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're a handful, literally, there's myself, Alex Antic, Matt Canavan, George Christensen and Craig Kelly that would get up and actually say something against what the party was doing in the party room.
Quite good, with that as well, yeah.
Whereas the rest of them are all a bunch of toadies and go, oh, we want to thank this minister for coming over to Western Australia and attending the local multicultural event. Thanks for coming over. It was so good to see you.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're not in the party room for that.
Yeah.
Actually, you might remember Russell Broadbent.
Yes. Yeah.
So I asked Russell one day, I said, Russell, was the party room like this back in 1990 when you first became an MP? And he goes, no, we used to have robust debates back then 30 years ago. He said, but now they're just a bunch of lame, weak, very weak and insipid, and no one's really prepared to speak up and say
So
anything.
upsetting he lost his spot, but he's a
In
gem.
any- I
He's a
mean-
gem of a human. In any experience I've had with him. So
Ultimately, like everyone is human. Like a lot of people, if it's your job at your workplace and you need to survive, it takes a bit of moral fortitude, as Sam Newman would say.
Yes. Well,
Sort of
I'm conscious of your time, and I remember you said you have to go around that. So
I've got another 20 minutes to keep going.
Yeah, cool. Well, something I did want to touch on, and I think we briefly touched on it at the start, but the mass immigration stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
How much of it is true? How much is false?
Yeah, well, like is immigration contributing to the cost of living, to the housing crisis? Is that just a too broad and simplified understanding of it? What's the solution?
Okay, so yes, it is contributing. There's no doubt about it. It hasn't always contributed to the problem. Initially, early on in our history, it was actually part of the solution. In my view, immigration became the symptom, not the cause. So interestingly enough, we go back to 1996 when Pauline Hanson said that immigration was being swamped by Asians. That was wrong. In 1996, we had less than 100,000 people coming into Australia. We had a population of about 18 million people, and most of them were English and Kiwis. Okay. For me, the change in immigration occurred in 2008 with the GFC. Now, this all comes back to our monetary policy, and I've touched on this briefly in the past. In 1985, Paul Keating lifted capital controls. Now, what that means is they were the rules and regulations over how banks borrowed money. So if Albanese came out today and said we're lifting immigration controls and anyone can come in and out of the country as they please, there'd be pitchforks in front of Parliament House.
And they still wouldn't listen.
Wouldn't it, right?
Yeah.
But that's what happened with the banks in 1985. Now, what that meant was that the amount of foreign debt that the private banks held went from 8 billion to 800 billion by 2008.
Wow.
Right, by a factor of 100. Okay, now that money was lent to hardworking Australians like you or me, but it inflated asset prices and with no bearing to earnings. So what that meant was that house prices went from 4 times earnings to 10 to 12 times earnings. It meant that 2 parents had to go back to work to pay the mortgage. It meant that the birth rate fell from, it was already going lower, but it speeded up the decline. And then what happened in 2008 was that the GFC, so for superannuation came in 1992, we had this creation of the financial planning industry, right? Because people had to put paper assets. They suddenly no longer invested in hard assets. They invested in paper assets. So I'll just go slightly off tangent here. The best way to describe that is today, well, this is a few years old, 40% of people retire with a mortgage. In 1992, it was 10%. Right. Because most people would put their savings and pay their mortgage off. Right. Today, they're forced to not pay their mortgage off. They've got to put it into a paper asset. Yeah. Right. And then most people don't know enough about financial security, so they go and get a financial planner. So the first 15 years, we had a whole heap of cowboys in the financial planning industry that were just skimming money off the top. Like when CBA bought Colonial Mutual, their wealth management division in the about 2007, 2008, 10 period, their return on equity on their wealth management division was 66%. Right? Like that's huge. Right? Basically because they were just skimming fees and they weren't risking their own money, right? So anyway, there was the GFC. A lot of people lost their investments, their paper assets, so they were forced to sell their houses to pay off the debt, right? That because they were told to borrow money against these paper assets. The paper assets crashed, right? So that was going to cause a collapse in the housing markets. Remember all these, but we now had $800 billion in debt, right? So in order to prop up houses, Kevin Rudd let foreign students buy housing. So what they've done is, so this whole foreign student rule is basically designed to prop up housing. And then, of course, you've got all these other vested interests in, like I said before, with News Corp and Fairfax, they're making money out of real estate ads. Yeah. Academia are making big money out of it as well. Now, on top of that, the other thing that happened in 1985 was a bloke by the name of John Button. He was the Victorian Labor Senator. Basically abolished a lot of tariffs on manufacturing and said, well, we can no longer compete in manufacturing. We're going to let it all go offshore. Right. So prior to 1985, most people that finished school went and got a trade. So the majority of people, working class people, were tradies, or at least amongst the men. And so they had a skill set. This year marks 40 years since that decision in 1985, and that's quite momentous because that generation of people, and this has been happening the last couple of decades, that generation of people who were on the tools are retiring, and the next generation's coming through. They've all been the ones that, doing the woke and brainwash stuff at university, right? So they're not replacing the people on tools. So we've got to import, and we're not importing enough. Looking at it from a productivity point of view, not the immigration point of view. We're not importing enough people to replace all these people that are retiring on the tools, right? And this is why we've got a decline in housing, because the number of new housing starts have dropped from 160 to 130,000. right? And then throw in this, right? Also, you've got this massive construction going on in renewables. So a lot of tradies that would normally be building houses are now off going building renewables because they're getting paid big dollars thanks to your taxpayer-funded subsidies, right?
Yeah.
So there's a conglomeration of issues in all of this, right?
Yep.
And it's very important that if we want to... So, yes, we've got to lower immigration, but we need to fix the underlying problems in the economy, we need to start manufacturing and doing our own, get back on the tools. We need to bring back credit controls. This is incredibly important. That lunatic Albanese a couple of weeks ago lowered the deposit rate to 5% for a house.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? If you save up 50 grand 50 years ago and the deposit you needed for a house was 20%, what's the most you can pay for a house?
A mil.
250 grand.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah, 10%.
50 grand deposit, 200 grand loan, right? And that's probably, that's where, if you had, in a perfect world, you probably wouldn't want any more than that as debt because, it takes, even to 200 grand takes a long time to pay off.
Yeah.
But this 5% deposit, what's the most you can borrow now?
So
950 grand.
Yeah.
So now you're borrowing 950 grand. It's no wonder 40% of people who are retiring with a mortgage.
Yeah.
I mean, you're lucky just to get the 50 grand to save today with cost of living and superannuation.
Having the extra money to save.
But what they've done is they've inflated so the true value of an asset should be net present value of future income streams. Your asset should be linked, the value of an asset should be linked to the earnings of the asset. So what we did in 1985 was we went and Keating said, right, we're no longer going to control capital. We're going to let all this foreign debt come in. Now, the other thing that happened was, you remember, you might be too young to remember this, but the Victorian State Bank Savings Bank collapsed in the late 80s in Victoria. No. So we know about it in Queensland because
I was one.
Yeah, I remember the dollar.
A lot of Victorians moved to Queensland because of it. I mean, Victoria's state government nearly collapsed because of it, right?
Okay.
Now, that's because what had happened was, instead of your normal state savings banks, what would normally happen is you go and put money in the bank as a deposit or a term deposit.
Yep.
That money is then lent to someone to borrow a house against, right? So your savings were backed by houses. When they actually lifted this control, it meant, so the Victorian State Bank, the idiot that was running it, I don't know who it was, thought we'll go and buy an investment bank. So they bought this investment bank called Tricontinental. And of course, this was the Skase and the bonds. You would have heard of Bond and Skase and these guys.
Yeah.
So the whole market, there was the 87 stock market crash, and there was a tumultuous few years there on the market where a lot of people lost a lot of money, a bit like the GFC.
Yeah.
So
I think my mum said people were killing themselves.
So the Victorian State Bank collapsed, nearly dragged Victoria down with it. So they had to start privatising infrastructure, right? So this is the result of Keating's stupidity in getting rid of capital controls. So as we've seen, we've increased foreign debt. We've now allowed people to borrow more money. We've had to sell our infrastructure to start paying off all this debt, right? So you see how now we've reduced, we've increased the level of foreign debt. You know what a balance sheet looks like? Yeah. So you've increased the level of debt. We've sold our assets and we've reduced our manufacturing capacity to generate income.
Yeah.
And this is the problem. See, in the old days when you couldn't go offshore and borrow money for housing, all you could do was, when I worked at the Bank of Queensland as a treasury accountant, for every $1 million we lent, 60% of it we got off from offshore markets.
Wow.
Right? So, but what that means is that 60% of all the interest you pay goes offshore. Right? So we're losing wealth that way. But not only that, if you could only borrow the 400,000 and not the $1 million, right, that we got from term deposits here, that's a virtuous cycle, because what that means is that the older generation, who generally have their most of their savings, they put their money in term deposit, they're lending to the younger generation, who are then paying interest back to the bank, who are then paying it back to the older generation. But it ties the housing prices to the earnings capacity of the prior generation, so that housing prices aren't getting out of hand.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So all of this reckless behaviour back in the 80s, and we touched on the Franklin Dam decision, Button plan, the lifting capital controls, this has all had, and often these decisions government makes takes 30 or 40, it takes a couple of generations to play out. This is why we're where we're at today.
Well, they wouldn't have been able to foresee that.
No, it was all near. I was there, mate. I mean,
it
it was all near. I mean, I was only 15 doing my, I did a commerce degree in the late 80s and that, but it was all neoliberal free markets and let the market fix everything. You can't trust governments, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But of course, as we now know, when you're basically lifting, so I believe in capitalism. So I believe in people who risk their own capital, but I don't believe in free markets. Right, because there's no. Have you ever been to a market where you get something for free? No. It's an oxymoronic statement.
Well, it depends how
it's like
willing
saying
you are
you
for a
believe in
criminal
climate
record.
change, right? It's a disingenuous tautology, right? Or multiculturalism. Technically, culture is a you share the same values. So you can't be multi and share the same values.
Yeah.
Either you share the same values or you don't.
Yeah.
Right. But we got sucked into that in the 80s, and I was a little free marketeer, but I sort of gradually joined the dots over the years, right? But so what we need now, the solution to all of this is coming back to your sovereign wealth fund, is we need an infrastructure bank. Because instead of, so the 1937 Banking Royal Commission, which was the original Royal Commission into banking, said the central bank should always control the volume of credit in the system. Right, now you've got to remember, if you know what a balance sheet looks like, when I say to people, do you know what capital is?
If you invest your own money or putting in capital.
What do you call that? Yep,
Yeah,
that's right. You're one of the very few people who've got that, Daniel.
Yeah.
But what's that called?
Investment capital?
Equity.
Equity, yeah.
Right, and what's the other type of capital?
Credit?
Credit, debt.
Yeah, debt.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yep. We have used credit for too long.
Yeah.
Right. So, and then over here in the balance sheet, you've got your asset, right? So your asset, if you're a farmer and you say you own a tractor and you're going to audit the farmer, you go and look for a tractor and you go and look for the invoice that says the farmer bought the tractor. Yeah. If you've got credit, you've got a mortgage instrument that makes you pay a bank to use someone else's money.
Yeah.
Right. Now, equity, and you'll understand this being in WA, because Western Australian mining companies do this all the time. They issue their own shares because they have title over the mining rights, so they have mining rights over untapped wealth in the ground. So what's Australia? So with that, just park that idea there. What's Australia?
We're a mining company.
No, we're a country.
Yeah.
Right? Who has title. This is really, really important. Title over all the untapped wealth in this country.
Okay.
Right? So why do we go and borrow money from offshore, pay people to use their currency? Why don't we issue our own shares against our own untapped wealth?
Do we own it?
Yeah, because we own it. So if we build a dam now for $1 billion, what we would do now under our current capital system, because no one knows how to manage money anymore.
Yeah.
We would go and borrow $1 billion offshore. Means the first $1 billion we make from that dam, we've got to repay offshore. Plus another 25 years, say 4% interest.
Yeah.
That's another $1 billion in interest. That's another $1 billion just gone offshore.
Yeah.
Why do we do that?
Because we've got nothing.
No, because we're stupid.
Yeah.
We've been brainwashed, just like our kids have been brainwashed about climate change, right? That basically governments can't print money.
Yeah.
Now, that's an oxymoronic statement, right? No, well, it's a misleading statement. The question isn't whether or not they print money. The question is what they secure it against.
Yeah.
So it's like secured credit, unsecured credit,
Yeah.
right? You can't get, if you go to the bank and ask for $1 million loan, you won't get it. If you had a farm worth $2 million, they might lend you $1 million because they've got an asset worth $2 million.
Yeah.
We have an asset, so
The whole of the untapped mining.
we have an asset called
resources.
Australia, which is 7 million square kilometres.
Yeah.
And not only that, we have an asset called rights to all the stuff that comes out of thin air. So sure, we're not. So this isn't a question of printing money out of thin air. It's a question of untapping wealth out of thin air.
Yeah.
And what's the wealth that comes out of thin air?
I don't know.
Don't know.
Rain.
Yeah.
It's free.
Yep.
Sunlight.
Yeah.
It's free. You go and
renewables.
yep. So from a country, the minerals basically you got technically free. The soil.
Yeah.
Right. So what do you mix it with to get wealth?
Trade, I guess.
People that
Sing it every time you sing the national anthem, boys.
soil.
Wealth, not soil. Wealth for rhymes with soil.
Toil.
Wealth for toil.
Yeah.
So
Right.
work.
So if you want, if you want to go and get yourself a little prospecting, metal detector,
Yeah.
and go and drive out in the Westpac WA, and
Yeah.
technically there's nothing. I mean, you might be encroaching on someone's mineral rights,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
putting that aside for a minute, you can create something out of nothing. If you're a
Yeah.
farmer, you drop a bull in the paddock with 20 cows, and you come back next year, you got 20 calves.
Yeah.
That is wealth coming out of the sky every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we have to do is resecure title over all of these infrastructure assets that we sold. Because currency, this is why I fight the crypto guys, currency is equity.
Yeah.
And that's what our forefathers gave to us.
Yes.
They gave us equity over this great land and all the untapped wealth that comes out of it. And every year when it rains and it shines and the grass grows and all that, that is wealth coming out. Mother Nature gives it that to us every year.
Yeah.
It's what our forefathers built. It's what our forefathers bled for. All we have to do, we don't have to go protesting on the streets on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
We just have to be smart and come up with the solutions and demonstrate to the people, like explain that to people. And even if you don't understand it, just know we want to change our monetary system and a tax system to put Australians first.
Yeah.
Now, I've just because I know we've got to go in a minute.
it's all good, mate.
This has all happened before, right? Who's the first guy to do this in Australia?
Yeah, not sure.
Lachlan Macquarie.
Okay.
Right, so the first 17 years of modern Australia, first 17 years of the colony, 1805, first 17 years of the colony, they relied on foreign capital, foreign currency, right?
Just from Britain.
Oh,
Or from
wherever.
just wherever.
Yeah, or we're just a sort of, where the ships would come in and
Yeah.
they just make it up as they go, right?
Yeah.
There was a drought in 1805. That currency got repatriated. There was no currency left in the colony, so they started bartering rum. Have you heard of rum rebellion?
Yes.
Yeah.
A rum rebellion.
Yeah,
I've
that
heard
was
of
because they started. That was all they had to barter, right?
Yeah.
Because the problem with rum is it's like you drink it, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
it literally went tits up with the rum rebellion.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So Lachlan Macquarie was the first governor. He came in after Bligh. He was the first governor to see Australia as a country, not a colony. He knew to run a country, you got to have military to provide law and order and defend the borders, taxation system, and a monetary system. So I don't know if how well you know Sydney, but on Macquarie Street there, you've got the Sydney Barracks and Sydney Hospital. All those sandstone streets that, ironically enough, stand opposite the RBA in Martin Place. They were built with basically using, as a result of that money, that currency called the Holy Dollar.
Okay.
Now, who uses the Holy Dollar as its logo today?
Holy dollar?
Yeah, the Holy Dollar. That was our first currency.
Probably the United States.
Macquarie Bank.
Macquarie Bank. Right.
Yeah, do you know Macquarie Bank?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know their logo, that big circular thing. That's the Holy Dollar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
Okay.
and the irony of that is those bastards made their money by privatising the infrastructure out of the Victorian State Bank collapse in the early 90s.
Yeah.
By privatising the infrastructure.
Yeah.
So they've basically ripped out, and taken out of our public hands that infrastructure. When they privatised the Port of Newcastle in 2013, they jacked up stevedoring fees. The people that bought it by 60% 9 months later.
Wow.
Right? Why are we selling our monopolies?
Yeah.
Right. This is where our wealth. So our sovereign wealth fund is the infrastructure that powers a country.
Yeah.
It's our power stations. It's our dams. It's our railways. Right.
Owned by the Chinese a lot. at the
Well,
moment,
exactly,
eh?
right?
Yeah.
So what we want to do at People First is actually start an infrastructure bank that issues equity in the form of infrastructure bonds from the state government from the federal government back to the state government. So say you build that dam for $1 billion, and then the state government repays that debt over 50 years. But when they repay the interest to Canberra, that money then from the infrastructure bank comes back to you, the people, as dividends.
Yeah.
It doesn't go offshore as interest.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
Now, there's few more things with that Holy Dollar. Why did Macquarie stick a hole in the dollar?
Not sure.
So it couldn't be counterfeited?
So it couldn't be taken back offshore.
Yeah.
So he didn't want our currency to go back offshore. He didn't want the wealth of the nation to go offshore. So by punching a hole in it, so that he used that Holy Dollar, the coins he got was the Spanish bloom, which was the reserve currency of the day.
Yeah.
So he knew that those coins would have value offshore. So he punched a hole in it so that the wealth couldn't go offshore.
they've done that to the
In
Aussie
other
dollar at
words,
the moment 'cause
you
it's
had to
worth nothing.
reinvest your money. He forced those people who made money here to reinvest their money here.
Yeah.
Right? Now, we've also got a hole in the dollar with People First because we're going to lift the rate of withholding tax on profits offshore to be above the corporate tax rate. So in 2022, Pfizer made $1.4 billion in sales here. They shifted $1 billion offshore in royalties to Ireland. Okay, so we lost 30 cents in the dollar on that when they got $1 billion tax deduction on royalties. We lost $300 million in company tax. Okay, now we did have a withholding tax of 10 cents, so we lost $200 million all up. Ireland, because it's got a company tax rate of 12.5 cents, made $125 million for nothing more than having a dodgy head office in Ireland and doing a couple of book entries, right? And Pfizer was $75 million better off. Wow. We want to lift the rate of withholding tax above the rate of company tax in this country so that people make money here. They have to reinvest here.
Yeah.
If they reinvest all the earnings off this beautiful country of 7 million square kilometres, we won't need to borrow any money, will we?
Well,
The flip side of that be they don't choose to do business here.
Well, what? Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Do we need them?
No.
Why do we need them?
don't need
Don't come
Pfizer.
here. Don't come here. I mean,
Yeah.
didn't you just say immigration was too high?
Yeah.
Why do we need this crap that we need? Foreign capital's got to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't need foreign capital. There's only debt and equity. If it's foreign capital, it's foreign debt.
Yeah.
I want domestic. What we need is domestic equity.
Yeah, okay.
We want sovereign equity, not foreign capital, not foreign debt. I want sovereign equity.
Yeah.
And more importantly, let me finish that. Expand
yeah.
that phrase.
Yep.
I want my children to have sovereign equity.
Yeah.
I do not want them to have foreign debt.
Yeah. And I mean, you've outlined through this whole episode, there's so many things that you can do that seem so simple and so logical.
Yeah.
And they're obviously not being done because of the corporate interests and the alignment
And
lobbyists.
politicians don't know what to do.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
just don't understand this stuff.
And so my question is then, a good way to finish, you say that's what the People First want to do and can do.
Yeah.
How? Because if it's really hard for you to get into power or even get into get in at all.
Yeah, good
what,
question.
What influence can you actually have?
Well, Rome wasn't built in a day, and all I can do, I've had a wonderful life, and I'm incredibly grateful for everything that's been given to me. It's a big step. I've got this huge tsunami in front of
Yes.
us. But I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep on coming on podcasts. I'm going to keep talking to people, and we're just going to put the word out there that we've got the best policies, we've got the know-how, and we've got the vision.
Yeah.
And we'll just keep talking. We'll keep the positive spin going because that's what matters, right? People are responding to the solutions. They're sick of the negativity.
Yeah.
And I'll go back again. You look at our founding forefathers, and I'll finish. Actually, let's finish off on that. Do you know what the first generation of Australian-born Australians called themselves?
No.
They call themselves currency lads and currency lasses.
Really?
Yep, because they were so proud of their currency, because the other currency that was used in the colony was the sovereign, the British sterling, right? And they looked down upon that because, this is where the POM started, the Pommy bashing started, right? It's like the POMs had come over here and thought they were hot shit with their currency, and it's like the currency lads and lasses were like, no, this is our currency.
Yeah.
When did we flip to Aussie? 1961 or something?
What's that, sorry?
When did we flip to the Australian currency? Was it 1961?
Oh, no. Well, we went to, we obviously had the Commonwealth of Australia notes from 1901.
Okay.
But then we went
we
to
ditched the
decimal
pounds.
in 1966. Before that, it was pounds and shillings. But that was still in the current Australian currency. It was just in the pounds and shillings, which was not the decimal
So they used the same
system.
words, but it was just...
Yeah. And the tragedy about that is our first generation of Australian-born people in modern Australia knew more about currency and monetary policy than we do today. And, of course, that's all by design, of course, because the RBA now remember talking about the CDC being an independent authority?
Yeah.
Well, they made the RBA independent years ago.
Yeah.
And this idea that we have unelected officials changing the price of money, right, and we have no say over them.
Yeah.
When was the last time you voted for the board of your super fund? Do you vote for the people that manage your money? No. Not much control going on. So you can't control your health now.
Yeah.
Health's been controlled by people you don't vote for. Your savings are being controlled by people you don't vote for. Your wages are being controlled by people you don't vote for. Politicians, as we started off at the start of the show, they're now being selected by the party apparatchiks and the lobbyists. So this is where democracy is falling over, and people first. This is what we want to change. We want to give people a say.
Yeah.
We'll make superannuation boards have to hold elections. We'll get rid of the independence of the RBA. It's got to be accountable to Parliament. We'll get rid of the CDC.
Yeah.
And we'll take control of our
So for
control
people
of
that
our
are
lives
listening that are like, well, I want to help, how can they help? Yeah.
Well, we'd love you to join www.peoplefirstparty.au. And I'm going to a couple of functions this. I don't know how soon you're going to get this out. No.
Yeah, it's not.
So we're in Perth this weekend. So if you hop on my Facebook page last weekend, I've got a meme of where I'm going to be over the weekend.
Cool.
So I think it's down at Fremantle tonight, tomorrow night. At a couple of places there, but just last Saturday I did the meme.
Fremantle Sailing Club, I think it was.
Yeah, it's either tonight or tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, yep. And there's one down in... I'll put it in the show notes. There you go.
Cheers. No worries. Yeah.
But, mate, it does seem like, and just to finish off, it feels like there is politicians long-term respond to the overwhelming demands of the population eventually. And usually you can see people flip, and you see that with net zero and certain things.
Yeah.
Overwhelming demands. And I guess it's just being loud and being continuous as a population, as a collective, because eventually if we keep pushing, the politicians, they want to stay in power. They are yes men. They want that. And if we're not going to vote them in, they're going to have to flip. So I guess that's as simple as it is.
Yeah.
Continue to voice ourselves. Use platforms like us. Call your local representatives. Call your local senators and
Or back the People First Party by the sounds of things.
And get involved with People First, because
the biggest takeaway is 200,000 people protesting as opposed to 200,000 taking action. Is a huge difference.
And if they talk to 50 people, that's 10 million people.
Yeah.
Suddenly, that's half the population you can get into government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that actually goes back to that pushing against and creating more resistance. It's just like, well, let's just take action.
And if you talk to people at the markets and through letterbox dropping at the shows, and you speak in a collaborative manner, and you're talking about solutions, you're listening to their concerns, they'll give you a lot more time a day. Whereas if they see you on the news at night, and they'll pick that one idiot out of 1,000 or whatever.
Yeah.
You got a much better chance, and this is where that grassroots movement of having people being prepared to go into the community and talking about solutions. And this stuff's exciting. I find the history of the currency lads, currency lasses. Our greatest general, John Monash. The legend has it he never fired a bullet in battle. He was an engineer who built bridges, and he was very strategic in World War One. The answer is very simple. We've just got to build again. We've got to get back on the tools and build up like our forefathers built up. When we started, finding inspiration from our forefathers, that inspires us to do things, and that'll inspire our children to do things.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to do. This sitting around bitching and wallowing in self-pity, I can't stand it.
That's that whole lack of resilience, and people just want to whinge and have someone else.
Yeah.
So I've
Yeah,
always
you
said
love
that on
the
this
old-
pod.
yep, yep.
I've always just said, like, I'm not going to be the person that, fucking jumps off a cliff. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to whinge about it unless I'm going to do something about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So, but the fact that we had 200,000 people turn out means there are enough people that want to do something about
Yeah.
it. And that's the only thing that they actually know
Yeah.
how to do. It's like, what do? I'll protest.
Yeah.
But instead,
Oh,
we've
there's
got
other ways,
Senator Rennick
yeah.
just Jared's telling us that we can actually, instead of spending money on parking, give it to the People First Party, or
Very good point.
go
Yeah.
drop a flyer, or there's actual actionable things that you can take instead of fucking whinging.
Yes, mate. Bloody awesome. Good,
Yeah,
mate.
great.
Anytime you're over, just
Very-
jump on.
Yeah,
and
no
we'll just,
worries.
yeah,
Well, thanks for
yarn.
having me on,
'Cause
guys. And it's great to be here in WA
Yeah.
as well. It's a great state.
I love the history lessons as
Yeah,
well.
mate.
It's
Well,
really
I
good.
think we could just talk for hours and
Yeah.
hours. But,
Oh,
mate.
yeah. We haven't touched on half of it.
Mate, next time you're over, we'll jump on again. But anything you want to plug, Delby?
Peoplefirstparty.com.
yeah.
This is going out tonight. So next week, week after, I'll be in Melbourne. I got shows Thursday night, Altona, Friday, Geelong, Saturday, Carlton, Sunday, Frankston. So grab some tickets. And Teacher
luck.
Comedy Night, Quiz Night, the first ever, December 17th. So if you want to come and represent your old school or versus a bunch of teachers, we've got 25 tables.
Perfect.
DanielDelby.com or at Daniel Delby.
Love it. I'm MC tomorrow night for the great man yourself. And Thursday night, I'll be Gong, just trying some fresh funnies. So, but all right, thanks for coming on.
No, thanks
Awesome.
for having me on. Yeah.
Awesome episode.
Great to be here.
Really good.
All right, bye-bye.
Ciao.